Today, I'm thrilled to sit down with Dr. Jay Burns, a board-certified plastic surgeon, an industry legend in the field of reconstructive and aesthetic surgery. One of your most well-known cases, 39-hour reconstructive case that was featured on Oprah's Medical Miracles.
We had a 2-year-old that got attacked by a pit bulldog. It ripped his face off from the eyelid crease to the angle of his neck. I mean, everything was gone. It was a skeleton. The power of reconstructive surgery, people think plastic surgery is all aesthetic. It's not. When I tell you I'm not going to operate on you, I don't think you need it. I don't know who sold you a bag of lies, but somewhere in your history, you've either been physically abused or mentally abused. I've realized that I've been focusing on the symptoms. The skin looks old, so let's go treat the skin. But what about how we're nourishing the skin? What we eat, our hormone levels, it all plays a role. I said, I came to work today because I want to help people. A dramatic improvement in the things that we can do for people and the way they feel. This wellness thing is not going to go away.
Hi, everyone. Paul Fulford here, and welcome back to Optimize Outcomes. Today, I'm thrilled to sit down with Dr. Jay Burns, a board-certified plastic surgeon, an industry legend in the field of reconstructive and aesthetic surgery. Dr. Burns has spent over 30 years transforming lives with his innovative use of laser resurfacing technology, pioneering non-surgical revitalization methods, and advanced skin health for optimal surgical outcomes. His career has been featured in Oprah's Medical Miracles and celebrated in publications from Allure to Cosmopolitan magazine. Today, we're going to explore his approach to aesthetics and the role of faith and resilience in his life and the future of cosmetic technology. Let's get into it. Dr. Burns, in recent years, we've seen sort of an uptick in people's affinity or gravitation towards non-surgical versus surgical options. Obviously, with you being an expert and vast experience in both, how do you decide what is typically best for that patient? And sometimes they come in there with preconceived notions. Like, what is it that helps you determine what that is, and what trends have you seen in regards to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's any bigger than it used to be. I think we can service that population better. But one of the things that has changed my career or has shaped my career is the fact that I heard the stat years and years ago in the 90s, that 90% of aesthetic patients are never going to let you do surgery. And so most of my surgical colleagues poo-pooed that, either dismissed the data, said it was not real, or said if it is real, then, they're lost if they don't do surgery. And that's kind of a surgeon's mentality. But I didn't take that, and it changed my life. That I said, if I can do a facelift, and I know the best sunscreen to give them, and I can do everything in between, then I think I'll be set up, to take care of all the aesthetic patients. And as you know, that's kind of the story of my life. Yeah. And so I a lot of the training that I did on my own, because there was nobody teaching lasers back in the 80s and 90s. And we can talk about that if you want to.
Absolutely,
but the point is that the trends I'm seeing is that I think there's been a huge uptake in the number of med spas, and as you know, I'm the audience may not know, but I have my own clinic here in Dallas, Resurrect Skin MD, but I'm also national medical director and founding board member to the largest med spa roll-up in the country, the most successful financially, and that's Cosmetic Physician Partners. So I have a pulse on the data, and I think even since we started 3 years ago, there might have been 9,000 med spas. There's now 12,000.
Yep.
And not to get political, but I think there's been some government regulations on small businesses, and I think that's going away. So I think the med spas are here to stay.
Yeah, I do too.
And so I've also had I've been president of ASLMS, so I had to think with that hat on if I was going to be responsible to the entire constituency of ASLMS. And so I'm not a surgeon, as you know, that restricts training. If somebody in Dallas wants to get trained, I'll train them. They could be right across the street from me.
Yep.
I just want people to have the best. I want them to be well trained. I don't want them to screw it up for everybody else. So I think the trends are that it's here to stay. I think non-surgical is real. And I think the reason that it's increasing is that I have seen non-surgical in the last 5 years, maybe longer, but not much, really take off with technology that wasn't here before.
Yeah.
And I think that now we have technology that is taking off. For example, the CO2 laser came out in roughly the mid-90s.
Yeah.
And
And you've been known for your, aggressive and innovative approach with resurfacing.
Yeah. And so when that, CO2 was hugely popular,
Mm-hmm.
but on the other hand, it also, in 95, it was like, I was in Cosmo and Allure, and
Mm-hmm.
I was publishing, and it was like a rocket ship.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2000, a lot of people got CO2 in their hand and they didn't know how to use it. And there's a lot of complications and whatever. So non-surgical took off. But at that time, there was really not any great non-surgicals.
Right.
The early IPLs were very basic and inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
Things like Cool Touch, which we called Cruel Touch, was painful and didn't work. And so I just think that we had some things that came along,
Mm-hmm.
and we can talk about that. But I really believe that the increase with great technology in the last 5 or 10 years has aided the rise of the non-surgical world.
Yeah. Do you speak further on that, as far as, like, again, you look at the old Coherent days when, you were taking basically the layer of the skin off, right? So
Yeah.
Specifically in the last few years, like, what are some of the innovations in, modalities that are exciting to you?
Yeah. Well, I think that, I think some of the modalities that are exciting to me right now are, everything we do. Let me back up for 1 second. And everything that we do, we are trying, for the most part. Now we're going to talk a little bit about AccuFit today, I think.
Sure.
But when I'm talking about lasers for the skin and radio frequency and ultrasound, all of those technologies are trying to do one thing. We know from our early days, I can remember when it was still controversial. If you heated the skin between 55 and 80 degrees, things happen, but it doesn't kill it. And so, if you get into that heat range, we now know that you will denature collagen and stimulate an immune response that will put collagen down. That's somewhat variable. It's still variable, and that's the problem. But I believe that all we're trying to do, no matter what those technologies are, is we're trying to do the same thing in different ways. And so the technologies now are trying to put it in exactly the right place.
Yep.
And they're trying to put the maximum they can without causing harm. And I think that's where Cynosure, with the technology they have, they talk about total skin solutions.
Yes.
And, multiple, I think the thing you're seeing a lot of now is you're seeing multiple lasers, multiple technologies used at the same time.
Yeah, combination.
So if you think a square centimeter of skin, how much damage could I put in that square, sublethal damage, heating to 55 to, really probably 65 to 80 degrees to create an injury that's non-lethal but causes new collagen and yet keeps healthy skin. And it kind of, essentially, when it's all done, you get really remodeled, new, healthier, and more volumized skin. We think about having more skin when we get older. That's not true. It looks like we have more skin because it gets thinner and looser and
gravity
stretched.
sucks. Right?
And gravity takes care of it. But if you look at what we really have is we've lost volume. The thickness, we're trying to get the thickness back so it doesn't wrinkle as much. It looks volumized. And that looks tighter, but I'm not sure a lot of stuff we do right now is really tightening. I think it's probably volumizing, which looks tighter and looks healthier,
Right.
But it doesn't really matter as long as it looks better. And I think that's what we're doing.
And that's, again, like the theory behind and utilization of fillers is to do the same thing, right?
Exactly.
But if you can do that now,
Totally,
where you're doing it naturally, it's not that maybe somebody doesn't need filler or want filler for, if it's like deep nasolabial folds or deep scarring that they're trying to revitalize, but you can do it where it's going to be sustainable for a longer period of time and look more natural now.
exactly. Yeah, you said it well.
One of your most well-known cases was a 39-hour reconstructive case that was featured on Oprah's Medical Miracles.
Yeah.
Um, and it was around like a traumatic accident.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you explain what that helped you uncover from the power of what reconstructive surgery can do, basically physically and as well as emotionally for that person?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that case was probably the sentinel case. I'm sitting here, on the the last furlong of my career. I still think I've got many years left, but I can look back over 35, 36 years and of practice and say that case was stands out among all the others. I still think I'm pretty sure it's the largest reconstructive case in history.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a 2-year-old boy from Oklahoma that got attacked by a pit bulldog, and it ripped his face off from the eyelid crease to the angle of his neck, including all the facial nerve, the lining of his mouth. I mean, everything was gone. It was a skeleton. And so I think people don't see that because for whatever reason his arteries went into spasm and he didn't bleed out,
Mm-hmm.
so they could save him.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a lethal injury,
Mm-hmm.
but he survived it. And that was up in Tulsa. And so he came to Dallas, and we put him in a coma for about 10 days and took him to OR and cleaned him all up. And then we got a plan. But during that time, there was no, Southwestern, UT Southwestern, where we were, is at that time and has been for 30 years the number one training program in the United States. People think Dallas is the center of plastic surgery because we do a lot of breast augmentations and,
Mm-hmm.
it gets glitzy and the women dress up and they're beautiful and whatever, and all that's true. But they don't realize that UT Southwestern is the academic center. At the time, we were doing selected readings in every residency program in the country, and many in the world were using our information. So we had the best people in the world: Dr. Barton, Dr. Bird, Dr. Rorik. I could go on, and we all, Dr. Kinkle, Dr. Adams. We had a ton of great people there that could put their 2 cents worth in. So, but I just happened to head the team because I was on call when the kid came in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up doing 5 free flaps where for the audience, you take muscle or composite. It could be muscle with skin on it. We took the entire abdomen powered by the rectus muscle. We put both forearms to line the mouth, both gracilis muscles in the leg to attach to the mandible and go across and try to give oral competence. We had to take sural nerves from the leg, hook it to the bilateral facial nerve trunks,
Mm-hmm.
and then split it and then hook it up to the gracilis so that muscle got tension.
Yeah.
To just think about, it just would fall off the face. Think about it. It's like putting it'd just be like putting a blanket up there and it would just fall down over time if you didn't have some muscle to do it. So
something to anchor.
Yeah. So all of that actually worked. It took 39 hours, and I think we had 9 surgeons, 8 or 9 surgeons, and 6 or 8 anesthesiologists, and Children's donated $1 million worth of OR time over, a couple of days. And it was really something. And so that got the world's attention, and 1,500 Sunday newspapers, and Oprah picked it up on her medical mural shows. I would say the one thing that was interesting about that was, and I'll never forget it, Louisville had the greatest probably microvascular and hand surgery unit at the time, and they were the ones talking about doing the first transplant, a hand.
Mm-hmm.
And we were, and all the stuff that I just mentioned, taking 5 different free flaps, and you've got 6 hours to hook it up and whatever, and you're using tiny vessels to hook up to tiny vessels, and it's incredibly complex. And to put it all together, how much easier would it have been if we could take a face from someone that had passed away but not dead, brain dead? If you could take a face, all you have to do is hook up both carotids, both jugulars, and you're golden. That's it. And the facial nerves and all, it's all right there. So I called Louisville, and the guy said, you can't do it. And, this is his life's career, right? This is his life's work. And I'll never forget this guy. And I said, well, let me tell you what I got. And I showed him some pictures. And he was just, his jaw dropped. And he said, okay, I'll help you. I'll do everything we can. But when we looked at it, it was the best solution. And we would have done that today. He walks in today, we do a face transplant. But at the time, he said, I think where we are with the drugs and the suppressing the immune system, we could probably let that live for 4 to 5 years max if we had a good result. Otherwise, it would be rejected.
Yeah.
It wouldn't probably last past 4 or 5 years with the drugs we had back when that happened, and which was 1999. So we decided to go the other way. We wanted a solution that would absolutely, give him the longest term. But it all worked.
Yeah.
He ate a cheeseburger. He wasn't the most. It wasn't the most beautiful. It looked like a burn victim to some degree. With lips that were big, and it looked different. But it was a huge success.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to see the empathy of the world. And heck, I didn't even know the impact. I was a surgeon at the time. I'd never seen Oprah. I didn't know she was the #1 show in the world at the time. And I went there, and it became pretty obvious. But and the impact of that show went on the Discovery Channel of Canada and the USA for 10 years. That show was shown.
Yeah.
I kept getting emails, and so the power of reconstructive surgery. People think plastic surgery is all aesthetic. It's not.
No.
It is. I remember when I was a general surgeon in Salt Lake City, I saw 2 cases when I rotated on the surgery. I saw Carl Hartramp had just invented the tram flap, where you take the abdomen and reconstruct the breast. And when I saw this breast, I went, wait a minute, that looks and feels like a real breast. It's amazing. And it has changed women's lives for the last 30 years. But I saw the first one done in Salt Lake City. And then the next day I saw a guy that had gotten his thumb torn off he didn't have a thumb, and torn off in a rodeo, which are much harder to put on because it stretches all the vessels, and so it's really hard. It's better if you have a clean cut.
Yeah.
So they couldn't put it back on, and so a year or 2 later, he didn't have a thumb, and thumb is 40% of your hand. I'm sorry, it's 40% of the function of your hand. If you don't have an opposable thumb, you're an ape.
Right.
And so I saw a toe to thumb, and this guy could, eventually, drink a Coke and hold it in his hand. And
did they do his own toe to thumb?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's called, if you don't have a thumb, it's called a toe to thumb. They'll take your toe.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, but if you lose your great toe, you don't lose hardly any function. It's interesting. You can run, you can do whatever you want to do if you lose a toe, but if you lose a thumb, you're screwed. So I saw those two procedures, and I just said, "Oh my God, I love variety," and it was just like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. Because at the time, general surgery was shrinking, and you was going to endoscopy. So, my daughter is a dermatologist, and she came to me after. She's brilliant, much smarter than her dad. And
hopefully that's same with mine.
Yeah. And her 40th birthday is tomorrow, and so time has flown. But I remember when she was 22 or 21 and thinking about going to medical school, and she told me she wanted to be a doctor. I didn't push her to do any of that, and I just wanted to tell her. It's hard. It's a very, very long course, and you have to love it. I just thought everybody, literally when I was growing up, I thought everybody in the world wanted to be a doctor. I really did. And I thought the ones that can't do it have to do other things. Isn't that crazy?
So you knew, did you know early that's what you wanted to do?
My dad had the most amazing medical history. He was electrocuted at Fort Hood. He was in the Brooke Army for a year. He lost 100 pounds. He worked the high line. The supporting strap broke his jaw, open comminuted mandible fracture. My dad was, I don't know. I will tell you honestly, there's never been a medical history that I've read that even comes close to my father. So the heroes in my family were all physicians, the doctors that saved him, the doctors that took care of him. And so I just always, they were my heroes. My dad was an electrician, as you can obviously tell. And, we'd go down there, and I grew up here, not very far from the studio in Garland, Texas. And our family laid bricks on the most popular hospital. It was the Spiegel Clinic. It was a privately owned hospital, and we laid bricks. My dad did the electrical, and so I grew up around hospitals and doctors, and I always thought everybody wanted to be a doctor. And anyway, my daughter, when she wanted to do it, at that time she was seeing me travel the world. I started to transition out of reconstructive and do a lot of aesthetic work. And so, at that point it looked glitzy and glamorous, and people knew my name and whatever. And I sat her down and I said, look, you got to work for a living, and this is a long road. And I read her the Riot Act, and at the end of it, she almost had a tear in her eye. And he said, but Dad, what else can I do? This is what I want to do. And I said, well, that's what I needed to hear.
Yeah. And that's what you wanted to hear. That's what you're hoping for.
That's what I was hoping to hear. And so she's a super, super popular dermatologist here in town with a very, very successful practice. She's expanded 3 times. And I've actually taught her the laser side of it, because, she went to a tremendous program, but even derm programs don't have a lot of laser many of the time. So it's been fun for me to teach her, and her business is wildly successful. And so that's I don't know how I got off on a chase. Better rein me in.
No, it's great. No, I mean that's what we're here. But this is just you and I ham and egging it like we normally would.
Yeah.
So it's I think that's interesting, right? What impacted you, right? That brought you towards it, and then to see that grit and that you basically wanted to let her know that it was like, hey, if you're going to do this, we're not going to do it halfway. It's going to be all the way. Totally. And you got to understand what you're getting in for, and I think that's the best. I think sometimes, you're somebody like myself, I know that has faith, right?
Absolutely.
And that's some of the things I think nowadays that parents are too concerned about hurting people's feelings, or that where it should be like, look, you need to prepare them for what's to come.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that, you're exactly right. I think that, 4 years later, I was there at her graduation, and I can't remember the name of what they call it, but it's when you put the gown on, or you put the collar around it, and I'm totally blocking it. Everybody in the audience is probably saying, it's called this. I can't remember what it's called. But I've got a picture of me putting, when she became a doctor, and it's a ceremony where you become a doctor. And I was able to, you have to have a doctor do it to someone else. And I was one of many parents at that ceremony. And that was really something special. I've got a picture of that she gave me of me getting, me having that placed on me, and then me placing it on her with this poem that just would make you cry. It's been unbelievable.
That's the thing that I found after having a daughter that, Publix commercials make me cry now.
Oh, listen, I cry for first downs. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I'm a very, very emotional guy.
Right.
And, I have her, and then I have a son, as you're talking about faith, is that, it's amazing how things shape your life. In fact, I didn't, let me stay on that for a second, but my son, struggled, and he knows that I talk about this, and he's doing great now, but he struggled with addiction for many years. He's an adopted biracial kid. And out of that, a ministry is formed. We're a 501c3. Paul, it honestly, at this point in my career, it takes up, I've got a book, I've written one, I'm writing another one. We just produced a video series of stories of transformation that I'm going to publish. And And out of that hardship, that's shaped my life. It's the most important thing I do. But God's been totally directing my life. I don't see him in the front windshield all the time, but I always see him in the rearview mirror. And I went to Harvard to train in vascular anomalies. There's never been a fellowship ever, and so I called John Mulliken at the wise counsel of my chairman here at UT, Fritz Barton, said, everybody's doing craniofacial and breast and whatever you ought to think about vascular anomalies. No one's doing it. And I went, what? And but I always trusted him, and I did it. And it turned out that I went there and I saw the need for lasers, and they weren't treating these kids with lasers.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back and knew there was a need, and there was nobody doing it. So there's about 90 miles from here in Waco. It's got it's where Chip and Joanna Gaines are.
Mm-hmm.
It was also where that massacre.
Yeah, David Koresh.
David Koresh was there. So people know Waco. Fortunately, it's Chip and Joanna have made it a comeback.
Yeah.
It's actually now one of, if not the most desirable places to live in the United States.
Well, Texas has, always been like a place that people will gravitate towards, but it's been booming like crazy.
Yeah,
different places.
Well, they've got a place there called Texas State Technical Institute, TSTI,
mm-hmm.
and I would drive there to Waco, and then some of them would come here, but I would take these laser physicists out to dinner, and I just had a pad and pencil, and I just they told me about. I learned lasers from the people who built them and who knew the physics behind it.
Yep.
And that, I think, is what separated me over these 35 years. And so it's just amazing that, that's just a gift from God, honestly. And so when I came back in, I started treating my kids. I started the second vascular anomalies clinic in the country, I think, second or third. And it was certainly the largest outside of Harvard. And I love taking care of my kids. And then I started treating with pulse dye. And one day we were in Orlando, where you live, and we were doing a course, and Dick Fitzpatrick was there, and they took us in a back room and showed us a coherent ultrapulse, and we peeled a tomato. I remember I peeled a tomato. Dick and I peeled a tomato. He was the derm, I was the plastic surgeon, and we put it in our hand. There wasn't any water on our hand. It was that thin, and we looked at each other and said, I think there's something to this. So Dick and I traveled the world together. He was a phenomenal guy. They called him father of lasers in the derm world, but I was right there with him, and we went all over the world speaking, and he was an amazing guy. But that led to resurfacing, and then resurfacing came out in '95, and my life changed forever.
Yeah.
I started doing 6 resurfacings a day and speaking all over the world, and I got Rox Anderson's attention.
Mm-hmm.
And
another Mount Rushmore person, right?
Rox is Mount Rushmore. He's the first person you put on Mount Rushmore for lasers.
Yeah.
And Jim Hobart's on there,
mm-hmm.
and there's a few others, but I became a friend of Rox, and so Rox put me on I think I've been on 95% of the significant SABs in the last 35 years. He put me on Cool Sculpting. I was on Cynosure's SAB.
Yeah. And Lutronics, right?
When they did, and Lutronics, when they came out with their Picasure, and when they came out with the, I have a history with, I'm not on their SAB right now, but, or maybe, I don't even know, but I work with them all the time,
right.
but Cool Sculpting, Fraxel, Ulthera, Thermage, all the Cyton devices. And so it's been a fun ride. And because I love subcultures. My, 2 things my dad told me, he was very, very wise, that impacted me, that I remember. I mean, he was an electrician. He got up at 5. He was the electrical foreman at Kraft Foods here in Garland, and which is a suburb of Dallas for those listening. And he's just a blue-collar electrical foreman, and he went to work at 5 o'clock. He got off at 2, and every day he'd go to the high school and watch my football practices, or junior high, and played a lot of sports. And then when we huddled up to do our wind sprints at the end of the day, you could see his green Rambler go to the house. And when I got there, he'd be sitting in his recliner and he'd wax eloquent about life. And, as I got older, I tried to avoid it, but things couldn't help him but set in. But what set in for me was two things, I think, that directed my future. And he said, I don't care what you do, but just know that 85%, and that might be a low estimate, 85% of the people in this country get up every day and really don't like going to work. And he said, so pick something that you love and then, and that you'll enjoy the rest of your life. And so for me, even at that time, I thought, well, no question, I just want to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing was, he said, and whatever you do, be the very best at it, the very best in the world. And he said, if you, this will fall on deaf ears for most people because they don't know what tiddlywinks are. But tiddlywinks was a little game where you pressed a little coin and you popped it up in the air. You try to get into a cup. It's a silly little game, but that's what we did. Pick up sticks and tiddlywinks. That's what we did as a kid. Those were actually good days.
Yes.
But he said, if you're the best tiddlywink player in the world, people will line up around Madison Square Garden to see you play. If you're the second, they won't. There's truth in that if you're the very best at it. So I don't know that I'm the very best at it, but I will tell you that I've tried to, I do something I love, and I love subcultures, and I love to see anybody that's the best at it. If they're the best, if it's the best podcast suite in the world, it'll have things that nobody else has, and I love that. And if it's the best laser or whatever, if it's the best tiddlywink player, people are fascinated by it. So for me to this subculture, I'm deeply immersed in it. So to find the best technology and something new and that's going to help people and that is very interesting, and I'm wowed. I love to have my jaw dropped, and I've been in a field where that's happened for 35 years.
For me, it makes sense now why I've always really liked you, because I feel like the very similar father. My father was 38 when he had me and 40 when he had my younger brother. And
yeah, my dad was 40.
Right. So for me, my dad was always sage, right?
Yes.
With a lot of the advice that he gave me, and it's similar in similar ways to what you just said. Was I had to memorize the Lombardi speech when I was 8 years old. Second place is the first loser, right?
I love that.
And when I did something wrong before supper, I had to run laps around the house, right? So, we started. After I had my daughter, he softened up a little bit, But I said in his eulogy, I said, if I can instill 50% of the disciplines in my daughter that he instilled in me, that's winning. Right?
Oh yeah, totally.
And before I ever acquired any kind of a skill set in my career, I was able to outwork my competition because of the way I was brought up.
Yeah, totally.
And it's very similar. The other thing was that he always said, because my passion, again, it's similarly to you. I'm a device nerd at heart, right? Like I like to know how things work, and if I can't through research on my own figure it out, I'm going to go to that person that is the expert and try to be in their hip pocket, right?
Yeah, totally.
And one of the things for me that always stuck home was the other thing that he always had said is that was to do that, was to seek out trying to be the very best you can, because you will, if you work your tail off and you're the best at something, eventually it will be how you can get paid, right? And how you can earn a living and love what you're doing. And then the other thing, again, and I think it has to do with the faith side of things, is that, he always told us that if we have a way to help somebody, it's our duty to do it, right? If there's something within our ways and means to help somebody, it's our duty to do it. And that's what gets me up in the morning. I love technology, and I love getting to work with customers like you, and like people like you are part of the reason why I've expanded my own knowledge, right? But it's really helping people at the end of the day, whether it's our customers that we have, our patients, or people I work with. That's what motivates me getting up in the morning every day is helping people, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like I hope that we're heading back more towards that. now,
Oh, yeah. Well,
and I mean, you get to do that so often,
yeah.
like we talked about the surgical case, right? Like, uh, are there any of those types of cases from a resurfacing and a laser and aesthetic standpoint that really stick out for you that was transformative, not only, on the physical, but emotionally for the patient? I mean, I know over your career there's been so many, but is there one that sticks out to you?
Well, I'd say maybe not one, but a class of those.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say that, um, I've wrestled, uh, Paul, with, uh, my faith and what I end up doing with aesthetic surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Is this what God has me doing?
Mm-hmm.
And, and every time that happens, it's probably happened about 2 or 3 times where I've really thought about, well, maybe I should do something else. Maybe I should go into the ministry or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's fun. It's just amazing. I just look back on it through that rearview mirror, and I'm telling you, every time I got serious about it, I'd get a letter from a patient, uh, talking about how I impacted her. And so I'd say that, I'll say a couple of things about that. One is that I think that I'm probably known most. I'm guessing you could probably know better because you look at me from 30,000 feet. But I bet you that, if I go to Russia, they're going to know me, but they're going to know me in the plastic surgery world, for resurfacing
Mm-hmm.
and aggressive, deep lines that nobody really wants to mess with.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been very rewarding. I do a preceptorship every other month, and people fly in from all over the world
Yep.
to learn what I call my island technique that I published in 2019. And I would tell you, when you take somebody, you can do surgery and facelifts and all you want, but if you don't make that skin look better, and you can take that horrible vertical sun damaged skin and make it look really good, that is like, it's life changing. It's debilitating to people to look in the mirror and they're 60 and they still got their health and they're climbing mountains. And I love resurfacing, and I've got a team that a lot of people don't do it because it's hard to take care of the people, and it's kind of a butt whipping, but
Mm-hmm.
we've got it down to a science, and I just love doing resurfacing. I think it makes a monstrous difference. I love plastic surgery, but the other thing I would tell you is that, about 3 or 4 years ago, I left the largest group in the country here in Dallas, to start my own business.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't. I thought it was going to be mostly. I thought it was going to be mostly laser,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up doing some surgery, and it's a long story as to why. But again, it's one of those things that at the time I didn't think I wanted to do it, but there were some things that forced me to do it, and it ends up that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be national director of the CPP, which has been. It's been one of the most fun rides ever. I work with amazing people, but so
We definitely want to revisit that.
yeah. But the point I was going to tell you is at that time I sent a letter to my patients as if I was retiring from surgery. So I got a lot of letters that came in. I didn't get any letters about, thanks for my breast aug or thanks for my, facelift. I got a ton from my kids, the kids that I treated in that vascular anomalies clinic for years and years and years. But the other ones that meant the most to me were I saw, if you're a plastic surgeon, you see a ton of women who are abused, honestly, by their husbands. I mean, I've taken care of 3 Miss Americas. And there's many women in Dallas that are much prettier than the 3 Miss Americas I took. And I've learned that being gorgeous and drop dead gorgeous is even better and worse. It's a mixed blessing because as you age, those women get everything because they look so gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the world we live in. And when they start losing that, some of them don't do it. Most of them don't handle that well.
And they don't know who they are anymore.
They don't know if people love them because they're beautiful or because they have an inner beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen a bunch of women that are literally crazy. I don't mean that derogatorily. I don't have a better word,
It's
but
psychological.
psychologically distraught, and it makes them seem crazy.
Right.
And when I was young and immature, I thought they were crazy. Wouldn't let their husband see them nude, crazy stuff, right? I'm being totally transparent here.
For sure.
Just some crazy stuff, and worried about stuff that nobody on the planet can see but them. And so I would go out and say, don't schedule that person. I'd be nice to them. That's the way I was raised. I was nice. But it put so much pressure on my staff, because the patient didn't know. So fast forward another 20 years, and now I've gone through this ministry with my son, and I'm a truth teller. I mean, my life is filled with conflict resolution. You tell a parent to stop enabling their children, you don't have any more conflict with that. They think that you don't know what they're talking about. It's putting my son or my daughters or life on the line, or a husband that's an alcoholic. Those are tough conversations to say. They got to let them hit their bottom. So the lessons that I learned in speaking truth, I've always been somebody that, I want to know when I have spinach on my teeth. I live with 4 men that we meet every other Tuesday that tell each other when we've got spinach on our teeth, because we want to be walking in a world that brings glory to God, and none of us are as self-aware as we need to be.
Right.
So I remember one day I was in the middle of this, listening to this woman that I'd known for a while, and she was gorgeous, and she was beating herself up and whatever. And so life's lessons and the ministry and all the things that I learned, it was almost as God came in and started moving my mouth. And I said, I got to tell you, I came to work today because I want to make money. And I take that back. I didn't say that. I said, I came to work today because I want to help people. And I'm not opposed to making money. I did not say I came to work to make money, but I said, I came to work because, I usually make a joke out of it, and I say my wife still likes Neiman's, and so it's not like I don't dislike money, but I really came to help people, and that overrides everything. So I want you to think about it when I tell you I'm not going to operate on you, is I don't think you need it. And then I said that day, I went further and I said, I don't know who sold you a bag of lies, but somewhere in your history, you've either been physically abused or mentally abused, or someone has sold you a bag of lies that you're not worth it.
Yeah, who told you you're not good enough?
And I mean, this woman began to heave, not just cry, but heave. And she ended up walking out and acknowledging that. And for the last 15 years of my practice, that's the conversation I've had with women. And I had letters from so many women that said, thank you for telling me what I needed to hear and not what I wanted to hear. I've never had surgery. I'm fine with it. I'm good. And I mean, some of them went away and they were mad, and I'm sure they found the guy
Somebody
right
that
next
would do
door
it,
to do
sure.
it. But those things made me realize that God can use me in the middle of an aesthetic practice in Dallas, Texas. He can use you anywhere. So those are the things that, to me, are the best things about my practice.
When that's that balance, when you feel that strong pull that you're called to try to do something else, that you're in the right spot.
Right. I pray with every single patient on every single case. And I think last year I had one person, you could tell that it wasn't something they were used to and they were uncomfortable, but they said, if it makes you feel better, go ahead and do it. But 99.9% of the people, when you're fixing to have a knife in your hand in about 15 minutes, and most of them welcome it openly, and it gives them a peace, and it develops this relationship, because the people that are problematic in your practice are the people that don't trust you, and they're just untrusting people, because I've given them no reason not to trust me. But I think that bond is, I can, so I used to think, well, I can only, pray with them if they've got cancer or whatever, and they're really, God put on my heart that I just pray with every single person for laser case, for whatever. And it's just it's a way that I think First of all, I think there's power in it. Secondly, it bonds me with the patient. They know who I am. I'm not playing any games. And so I think you can bloom and where you're planted, you know?
Yeah. And again, especially if they're going under, I mean, the last thing they should be thinking is a nice, peaceful, nice, happy thought, right?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And that's interesting. You know, I did want to talk about that side of it, right? Where, the psychological side, the emotional side, right? And the conversation naturally went there. It's that, how, like, I was wondering how often you've had to run into that, where it's
all the time,
you know, and how do you manage that? You know, because again, it is sometimes psychological, and it's, you know, when the inside doesn't match the outside, you know, those conversations. Did you start out that way
No.
always? And you felt like, was there something that eventually made you evolve to that?
Well, I think that, you know, I started out, you know, I think, you know, I mean, for people out there that don't have a faith, look, I got tons of friends that don't have a faith, you know, I mean, and I don't judge anybody, you know, it's whatever,
Nope.
you know, I went on a journey and whatever, but my faith in terms of, and then maturing, you know, I grew up in the church in Garland, but I put it on the shelf. 4 years at Baylor, that my nickname on the back of my jersey was the Keg. I've never lost a chugging contest. I you know, I was in that age where we experimented with all kinds of things, and I was not perfect, but I
You said you like subcultures.
Yeah, I did. I like subcultures, and so I think I was always a kind and good person.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
But if you wanted the guy to be the life of the party, that was me, and but I wanted the American dream, you know, and that has nothing to do with glorifying God. It has to do with glorifying AJB here, you know, and so I just remember that again, you got to realize I grew up in a very blue collar person. My brother and I were the first people in our expanded family to go to college. Hitting the big time was new.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from Garland to the most, upscale neighborhood in Dallas, Highland Park, University Park. I bought a house there. I sold my 71 Volkswagen. It had a beat up rag top. And bought a Lexus.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in Highland Park. I was in the most prestigious academic program in the world. I was in the most prestigious private practice probably in the world, or at least one of them. I had, you know, a lot of times God will take you to the mountain, to the gutter, you know, and you hit your bottom.
I'm aptly named, by the way.
Yeah, Paul, exactly. And so, but to me, he took me to the mountaintop, and I walked in one day, and I told my wife, who I've been married to for 46 years, I said, this was when I was about 33, and I said, babe, I've shown everybody this house and everybody this car, and if this is all there is to it, I don't know what life's about. And I had a good friend that had been waiting in the wings. It was one of my fraternity brothers, a really devout man, and still one of my very best friends in the world today. See him all the time. Lives here in Dallas. He just started walking me through it, and then I just decided I wasn't going to accept a faith without. I'm a scientist, so I, you know, got the Quran. I got the Eastern religions. I explored, you know, Mormonism, and I wanted to know. I didn't want to just do it because I was a Bible. I grew up in the Bible Belt, and so I just have found that, you know, for me, the Christian faith is by far the most reasonable, the most archaeological supported, the most, you know, whatever, and that's how I got there, and so that has shaped my maturity. So I didn't start that till I was about 33. So my walk took quite a while, and then I began to mature, and then just age will do it. And other people that have no faith at all over time come to a similar maturity. So I'm not saying that's the only reason, but for me,
life
experiences just made me want to be honest with my patients. I didn't feel like I was doing them any favor, because if I just didn't operate on them, they were going to go to the next person, and it wasn't going to end well.
Your goal was to let them know that it wasn't necessary.
Exactly.
Not, you know, like, I think that, when we are getting ready to speak at a workshop this weekend, right? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people when they come to these things that we put on that are looking to get into this, are brand new to one of those new med spas you talked about, right? And they, in the beginning, they feel almost like they're revenue starved, and they will accept all these things, and they end up letting patients talk them into treatments when they know that that's not the optimal outcome that they could provide, right? And and again, it's a maturity thing too, right? I think, but it's so important, to be able to articulate that and meet them at a place where they can receive it.
Well,
right?
you make a really good point, because part of that experience is, we learn from things we do wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So don't, early on, you accept this patient, you're going to treat them, and then you realize you just boarded the crazy train, and that's a long, hard road there.
It is.
So you do that a couple of times, and you want to avoid that. And so right now my bar is super high, and so I'll just realize that, when somebody comes into me right now, I think I'm personable, I'm sincere, I think I'm good at what I do, and my consults usually go well.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the first 15 minutes, I've usually gained their trust, and they're ready to go. And then I realize I don't know that I can ever make this person happy. So I used to figure out how to get of it, and now I just stop and go, hey, you know what? You're a good candidate on paper, but I don't think I can do you, because I don't think I'm good enough to meet your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And then they really flip out.
Yeah.
And
you know who is so-and-so down the street.
Right, exactly.
If they've ever done you wrong, that's not Christian.
Exactly. So
yeah.
So that's, and it's actually it's fun and it's freeing. So I'm really, really have a high bar at this point in my career, because I don't, I think I had a pretty high bar for the last 15 or 20 years, but it's gotten higher and higher, just because the patient that walks into me now they have to trust me. I have to get that feeling overwhelming when I tell them, realistic results, and I can't control their outcome. I need them to say, and most great people will just say, hey, look, I'm looking for some improvement. I know that, I'm a human, you're a human, nothing's perfection, but I just would like to get some improvement on this. Do you think I need it? And I go, yes, 100%. Let's go. That's the person you're looking for. That's what I would tell people listening to this that are opening up a med spa. Let me tell you, if you get a bad feeling about a patient, even if you're on the fence, be honest with them and tell them you're not good enough to treat them, and that you don't think they need this and this it is. And they may get mad and walk out, but I'm going to tell you, you're doing them a favor. You're doing them a favor.
Yeah.
And when those elevator doors close, or that door closes to the front of your office, that's the best feeling in the world. Yeah, you don't have to deal with it. There'll be plenty of patience. If you do things right, there'll be plenty of patience. You don't have to extend it to everybody that's crazy. And most of the time, you can, they're crazy for a reason. When I say crazy, I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm saying, I'm putting them in a category, is probably a better word, that they're emotionally unstable, they're not ready, they've got body dysmorphic syndrome or something like that.
Disassociation.
Yeah,
yes.
You're not doing them any favors unless you be honest with them. And so they may run off and be upset, but it's a long race. They'll finally get it.
And maybe that's what they've needed all along, because people haven't been honest with
100%.
them. Right.
100%.
And, you mentioned the consult. I mean, obviously that's probably the most important, critical part of taking things and putting that plan together, right? So, and you mentioned earlier combination treatments. So, I mean, with your experience throughout the light spectrum, radio frequency, ultrasound, what are you finding yourself? I mean, again, it's based on patients and what their outcomes are, what they're looking for. But what do you find yourself doing the combinations of most lately, and what are you looking for when you're looking at these combination therapies now?
Yeah. Well, combination therapies are the rage, and I was doing them long before that. I work with, as I work with several companies, but in terms of if we're looking at Cynosure today, I think that they have the best radiofrequency microneedling device in the world, a genius, and it puts the energy at where it needs to be.
The RF needles are a delivery mechanism.
They're a delivery mechanism for that heat, and they're accurate. They're sharp. We can talk about that if you'd like. But the point is that we're putting that energy down in the dermis where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's one other device called the Profound that does it similarly, but I like Genius better than Profound for other reasons. But at least those devices are the two devices that measure impedance and adjust accordingly so that they deliver a consistent energy where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
The others are just hot needles.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can deliver it there, then we can come in with the Ultra, with the thulium laser,
mm-hmm.
and treat there so you can polish the skin. So
it's like fluffing the pillow and then washing and ironing the pillowcase.
Exactly. Right? In fact, we just completed a study with Lutronic,
mm-hmm.
which was before the merger.
Cynosure Lutronic.
And where we combined the Genius is on the chest, neck and chest, the Genius and the Ultra
mm-hmm.
and the Derma V.
Mm-hmm.
The Derma V is
talk about vascularity. You were talking about all that earlier.
Yeah. I mean, so if you know where you're going, the Derma V has a mechanism that follows the law of selective photothermolysis, mm-hmm. which targets the reds. It targets the browns. So you go after the reds, you go after the browns. You then polish the skin with the thulium, the Ultra, mm-hmm. and then you place energy down in the bottom, and all in one setting. We had a 95%, patient satisfaction.
But when they looked at the blinds photos?
When they looked at the photos. So
wow.
I think those combinations are so fantastic.
That's such a high. I mean, you only need 80% technically for it to be like approved, and you also touch on another good point there, right? You've talked about aggressive resurfacing, and obviously that's something mm-hmm. that's a passion mm-hmm. of yours. Mm-hmm. Your colleagues, I believe, with ASPS are the ones that came out with that, where they were asked to look at pictures of faces, and then that were the same faces, and then there was pigment added to them, and what is it? It's 10 to 12 years that is the average. People think somebody is older just mm-hmm. by having the pigment added, not just the resurfacing, right? So anti-aging and turning back the clock and revitalization is it's way more than resurfacing as well, right? To do it completely.
Right.
So having that combination treatment is incredible, right?
I agree.
Where you're hitting the reds, the browns, and the revitalization. And there's not a whole lot of social downtime with that, really.
There's not. When you do all the things I just mentioned, there might be a few days.
Sure.
But it's not like resurfacing. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and once you do 2 or 3 of the radiofrequency microneedlings, which has the most downtime, then a maintenance program, with the Derma V for reds and browns has very little downtime. And so I think those are the things that we do a lot of with regard to combination therapies. Cyton has their own combination therapies.
Mm-hmm. Forever Young,
the other combinations do as well. Mm-hmm. And we use, we use them all, but I think that's the future. That's the present, mm-hmm. and it's going to be the future as well.
What's nice, because again, sometimes I think people, again, like audience can understand consumer wise, but also people in our space is that, sometimes there's a little bit of bleed over with modalities and technology, but there's a reason for that, right? Because you've got to be able to, you don't want to fit a square peg into a round hole. You want to fit a round peg into a round mm-hmm. hole. You want to have the tool necessary to do that. And combination, again, and I think something that people don't necessarily talk about as part of the combination therapy, but you mentioned it earlier, is skincare, right? Like what are you doing that, in some of these cases, whether it's laser or reconstructive, mm-hmm. to prepare that canvas or skin mm-hmm. in advance? What are some of those things that people can do to have that better canvas to begin with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we just did a study with Elastin.
Mm-hmm.
I went during COVID when everything was shut down. One of the things that frustrated me, you're talking about subcultures. It seemed insane. I was a surgeon. I hang with dermatologists. I've learned so much from them because you can't speak on lasers without surrounding yourself with a ton of really good dermatologists. And Vic Ross, Jill Cohen, Susie Kilmer, Jeff Dover. I could go on and on for Roy Geronimus. I could go on and on with fabulous dermatologists that I've learned from. But, how can I run with all those people and know about sunscreen and all this other stuff and not truly understand skincare? So I went around the country and flew myself around to a lot of the major manufacturers, and I learned a ton about skincare. I learned it is the wild, wild west, and claims and all this other stuff. Or I won't. It's beyond the scope of this podcast. But I will just say that I prioritize it is I want a company that does it in house. They have their own. They buy the best products, quality products, raw products, ingredients, and it's a catalog you can choose from.
Yep.
And you can get the cheap ones, or you can go and get the great ones. It costs more money.
Yep.
I want somebody that will test those products for activity in a gene regulation lab, and then you can gain or lose it all if you don't have the right formulation, because 2 really active ingredients can cancel each other out. So they have to test that. So I want them to have a formulation lab. And then the final thing is they do good science. So, the proper washout, proper controls, and the companies to me that rose to the top were Elastin and Revision. That's who we use. Because if you have 14 products there's others out there that I'm sure are great that I'm not saying I covered every one of them, but
those showed you what you wanted to see.
Those showed me what I wanted to see. There's a few products that are out there that we single out, but I would encourage the med spas out there to realize if you offer 14 products, you start out and you have a patient comes in and says, I want this, or I want that, or I use this product, you got to choose, because I realized that if we had 10 lines, my patients should have been thinking, he didn't know which one to offer me. And they were right. And so we don't do that anymore. So both of those lines have amazing products that you can use around procedures. Elastin is kind of known as the surgical friend.
Yeah.
So their regenerative nectar, their Illuminate, which is beat hydroquinone, heads up. We prepare the skin 3 weeks in a row. Mitch Goldman, Sabrina Fabi, and that group in San Diego proved that if you can treat 3 weeks with nectar before the resurfacing, they have a faster healing and less
and it's
efficacy.
Also great post-procedural. And
then we use it post-procedure, and they had another study that showed that. So we use that product. Now, I will say that Revision has a product called CMT, chemical, mechanical, and thermal, that we tested and did the study in our office. And that is the first product. It's a total, there's no other product like it. It's a neurocosmeceutical, which is a whole new vertical. And it affects the keratinocyte, which affects the sensory neurons. It's not a topical lidocaine. It's not the same procedure. But when you put that on immediately after a hot treatment like a Genius or whatever, or whatever it is, CO2 or any of that stuff, it won't take away the heat totally, but that burning for the first hour is what gets you.
That sunburny feeling.
It takes that and reduces it probably 60 to 70%, and it's night and day. So we use CMT post treatment on everybody. Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, and Revision's known for Nectifirm too. I mean, that's
yeah. Those are great products.
And I think that's important, right? They're like for people getting into the aesthetics, whether they're a consumer or a practice, there's a major difference between medical grade skincare and things that you can get. I mean, there's still uses for an Aquaphor because it's very gentle, right? But I mean, really, when you're looking at things that are going to prepare the skin pre and post, it's just night and day.
Yeah, and for if there's even consumers out there that are listening, this stuff on TV and the oil of Olay and all that stuff, and they give you these graphics. Realize that's big pharma, and those graphics are not reality. And there's a difference between, you're paying about as much for a lot of those things. La Mer?
Yeah. Oh, it's way more expensive.
La Mer is the most expensive thing out, and it's total junk.
Mm.
You know, I mean, I think it's total junk, and most there's hardly anybody. I have some patients that swear by it, you know, and it's just emotional. But you know, so why don't you pay even less than La Mer and get something that's been proven scientifically? I think buying your skincare in a medical grade thing is probably the easiest and the safest thing you can do, and the best thing you can do.
So we just talked about combination therapies. You know, one thing that you and I are pretty close with, and is sort of been a passion project for me, is the AccuFit device, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
One, it's great to do, and while somebody's doing procedures, right? And you do a lot of things that are people
Right.
are numbing; they can
Right.
do it while they're numbing.
Right.
But you've also, you know, you actually had me on a webinar for your practice talking about
Right.
AccuFit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And explain, you know, what is it that is so exciting to you about it? And, you know, again, like you talked about the cutting edge technologies and things getting to an evolution of where they are now. Like, how is it different, and why are you so excited about it?
Yeah, I think that you know, I get technology coming at me. I mean, you know, it's taken me 35 years to get to this point, but you know, if I endorse something, it carries some weight, I think, because I'm not going to lie about it and whatever. And but you know, I'll get 10 things that come through my office, and I might pick one or two of them to put in my office. So how do I sort through that? I have to have some way to triage those 10 down to 5. I don't want to look at 5 of them. And so what I do is I look at it and I go, does this make sense or not make sense? And then even if it makes sense sometimes, you know, I'll throw out 3 more of the 5 remaining before I'll settle on 1 or 2. And so AccuFit makes a ton of sense to me. I didn't, you know, the electrical stimulation, you know, has some challenges. You have an edge effect. I learned that with thermage.
Yeah.
Anytime you use electrical current, to get the kind of energy you need usually comes with the potential complication of burning or something like that.
Or just pain.
Yeah, and pain. Yeah. So the way the electrode was designed was a game changer. And so if you can get past that, now let's say you do that and you can put it at the origin and insertion of the muscle, then you can actually isolate that muscle individually, which none of the MMS devices, the magnets, do. It's a group hug, so to speak, under the magnet, but it's not origin and insertion. It can't get like the extremes of the muscle, or you could get one end of the muscle. And I'm not saying that there's not MRI data that it doesn't work, but this actually simulates a workout, and the technology behind it is phenomenal. And so that you can use your rectile as you're doing a sit-up. You could put it on the transversalis like you're doing a
medicine ball twist,
medicine ball twist, and a plank, and all of those things. And I think that then when I saw some of the data, you know, you said earlier on, you appreciate the compliment that you learned some things from me. Well, you're not like anybody that comes in the office. I mean, you don't just know this. You're passionate about it, and you know it better than anybody I've ever seen. And so that's what sells things. It's like somebody that's intelligent, they're reasonable, they're honest, they're passionate about it. And I kind of think that's what I am, and things that I know, and you're really great at that. And so, once we started exploring it, it just made a lot of sense that it actually simulates a workout. The crunches, the cross crunches, the planks. And then I saw the data that, in the study where, you know, biceps, triceps strength and plank hold times were doubled with really in a short time, like 6 weeks, you know, and that's just amazing. And so I think that all of that makes sense to me. And I don't believe that, I mean, I believe there might be, I think you need a fat device that does just fat, in my opinion.
I do too.
And I think that some of these MMS and the other companies that combine this with radio frequency for fat, I just don't know. some people say it works. Some people that have it say it absolutely doesn't, and they have to still use cool sculpting or something like that.
If you think about it, right, you understand anatomy, and fat pockets are elliptical. They're typically asymmetric,
Right.
and they don't typically fall where anatomical muscle does. So if you're going to have something, again, people when they have what like slang term love handles, flank fat, basically. If you're looking to accentuate the natural curvatures of the body, you're not treating where it hangs over. You're coming around this wherever that for a man it's more of a V, typically a male, and for a female it's more of where that hourglass is. It's more around the backside even than it is where it is, right?
Exactly.
There are devices that non-invasively destroy fat. There are devices, and AccuFit being the one that's really only based off of actual movement versus confusion, right?
Right.
That build muscle. And like you said, it's not that the other one doesn't work. It's just this one is at a whole different place, right?
Well, I think it's exactly right. It's just, you can actually put it in places where you really need it, and it helps with, you can put it on,
arms, calves.
I don't know. The FDA approval stuff is we have to kind of.
The only place that we're not really, we say you cannot treat is chest, right? Because heart's a muscle. And
exactly.
We use electrical for other reasons for the heart.
Yeah, exactly. But biceps, triceps, calves, hams, quads, of course, abdomen, fantastic. But people don't realize it's you think about using it for even in athletes who hit a plateau and they get them to that next level where they can do more and then take it to the next level. It's also great for when you get older and you start getting in your late 60s, 70s, certainly in the 80s, just getting out of a chair is tough.
Right.
Having stability and core strength is just great for that whole group of people. People recovering from pregnancy and want to get back working, you can fast track, post-surgery, postpartum. It's just a great thing. And I think that we use it in conjunction with, I still personally believe, I may be biased, but despite everything you hear, I still don't know that there's anything better than cool sculpting
for bulk removal.
For bulk removal of fat, there's really not.
It's really hard. I mean, and it helps expedite that lymphatic process if you do it in tandem, right?
Exactly. So we use that combination quite a bit, and then we see it a lot. It's the timing on that is really good because body contouring, cool sculpting, across the country. I have this data because of CPP, but. It's down about 40 to 45% in terms of body contouring, fat removal. But the issue is that these semaglutides and the weight loss programs will reduce muscle mass.
They will.
And so I think there's two things that will help that a lot. One thing I've learned since we've talked, but one thing is clearly exercise and something like AccuFit would really help you. And we try to use that for anybody. We do wellness because so many people do these knockoffs. And I thought, well, it's got its pros and cons, but who better to explain the pros and the cons and tell people, how to do it than a physician. And so we've actually decided to learn all about it. And so we actually distribute it as long as we can now. But in conjunction with that, because we can also be a full service bank, we can offer them, an exercise program, AccuFit, and even people lose their weight. Oftentimes, surprisingly, they still got a few little areas of fat that are resistant. And so we have the full program there. The other thing that really is, Paul, we've not talked about this, but, hormone replacement therapy is you're going to hear a lot more about it. It's
for sure. Vastly
underestimated. Do you know what the number one hormone? I ask every woman that starts going through weight loss or comes into our office now. In our CPP, I've learned a ton from a guy named Johnny Pete. He's in Houston, and he is an OB-GYN that is probably one of the world's experts on hormone replacement therapy and teaches it. Has his own company that produces a pellet that is got a little micro dose of steroid in it. So the complication rate in the last 4 years has been zero in over about 10,000 patients he's treated. My point of all that is I ask him, what's the number one hormone a woman will produce in her lifetime? They all say estrogen. It's testosterone. And so Johnny's done a study with 4,000 women, I believe. It's a large group, and weight loss. And if their testosterone is optimized and they're on an exercise program, not one of those people had muscle loss. So I think AccuFit. So we're adding that to our regimen now
for the GLP-1s.
The GLP-1s. We want to make sure their testosterone's optimized, their hormones are optimized, their thyroid, all of that. And honestly, I don't want to get political, but no matter who you voted for, you can't argue that our country is a mess when it comes to what we eat,
food supply,
and our health.
For sure.
It's just insane. And I never really thought about it much. Like I say, I'm an old redneck from Garland, and I ate cheeseburgers and French fries, and I thought I didn't want to believe it because that's what I ate, and it tastes good, but it's killing me.
Yeah.
And it has all these complications. So I think that, the semaglutides can have some complications, but I can tell you what,
you can mitigate it.
But I'm going to tell you something.
Yeah.
Obesity is rampant.
It is.
And getting their weight down and trying to do it well. So we're trying to figure it out. It's a huge part of what we do now, both locally at Resurrect and nationally at CPP. And it's probably the fastest growing part of our business.
Well, you can look at things and you can see people have podcasts that are out there like Gary Brecka, right? I remember watching something and actually speaking with him about this, where non-organic apples, you can crush them up into a liquid and use them to repesticide with. That's how much is in them still. And effectively, it will still be an effective pesticide, right? That's the stuff we're putting in ourselves, right? You look at, Rogan's talked about it on his podcast, where some of the guests he's had on, where the cereals that are sold here are completely different formulations that are just sold in Canada, right? And
well, all of that's coming out
the
now.
biggest drug they're hooked us on is sugar.
Right.
Know?
Right.
Because they've worked out these formulations that just make you want to eat more and consume more, right? And like the movie theaters is a microcosm of it. Like, order a small, it's this big,
right?
You know what I mean?
But if you think about it, the thing that excites me, this is I say this tongue in cheek because I'm, my time here on Earth is limited. We're all limited. But I just want to go, gosh, I'm sure everybody on the planet says, I wish I had more time, because now I'm figuring it out. I think about, people come to me. The reason I'm doing all this, Paul, is because I've realized that I've been focusing on the symptoms, like the skin looks old. So let's go treat the skin. But what about how we're nourishing the skin, what we eat, our hormone levels? It all plays a role. And 100%. So I really believe that we're going to see a dramatic improvement in the things that we can do for people and the way they feel. This wellness thing is not going to go away. It's massive. And I think that we'll be able to optimize skin, take the kind of, when we were talking at the break, take the tests and evaluate, what is inflammatory to you. And by changing our diet, I really believe that if we'll see with this new administration and the safety czar, the health czar, but I know it's controversial. And
absolutely.
I'll probably irritate a lot of people.
No, it's totally.
But if it's not him, somebody else, at least somebody, let's figure out that why are we the number one country in the world with chronic disease? We should be leading the world.
Heart disease.
Yes, it's crazy. And I think that's going to actually make our skin healthier, our gut healthier, we'll be healthier. The inflammation will be down. That'll help our skin. Our lasers will work better. I think it's all going to play a role. And I think that we don't realize all the things that we can do to impact that. And we're doing that locally at Resurrect Skin MD, and we're implementing that across the country in 50 clinics. And so I feel great because I have a big petri dish of clinics where we can try things and do A/B testing and things like that. So
that's huge.
It's going to be fun.
And that's the thing that I'm seeing too. And we put it under this wellness category. I feel like we're going to end up creating a new name for it, right? But probably you look at a lot of these recovery therapies and medical aesthetics and surgery now blending, right? Hyperbaric chambers. That
Right.
was something
Right.
only used for injury in the past, and now it's for, I mean, you put somebody in there after something post-surgical or post-aesthetic, and you're just forcing that oxygen in.
And cryo chambers.
Yes.
I mean, cold therapy now has revolutionized, people that get paralyzed.
Yep.
They darn near kill them, freezing them down. But, the results are just, revolutionary.
Yeah. You look at the Norwegians where they cold plunge and do steam therapy, and they have much less heart disease and heart issues than we do.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
the data's there, right? And that's something like I love about you, and that I've, how I was raised was like, I'm a seeker of truth, right? Like
Totally.
just, I've worked for, I work for an aesthetic device manufacturer, right? But I am not that person that's not going to tell somebody's that technology that somebody else has isn't good, because I'm a laser nerd, a device nerd at heart, and I'll say that is a very efficacious device. It's not
Right.
ours, but it's a damn good device, right?
Right.
Because it is. And I think also in this day and age, it's something that you have to combat with patients now, but there's so much information at everybody's fingertips because of our phones, right?
Right.
And you really do, like, again, I'm hoping there's going to be a shift, moving forward in this space, and it's something that I'm trying to, forge a path on, where the buzz in the marketing should be about efficacy. If the marketing is it can get out to the patient that this is the most efficacious and this is why, that's why people should do treatments. It's not all things are created equal, not all treatments or devices are created equal, and the most expensive thing somebody ever has to pay for is the one they pay for twice. The one they pay
Right.
for, they thinking it's going to get the result that they want, and then having to actually pay again to get the result that
I
they
think you
want.
pay for two things, right? You pay for efficacy, and that has to be coupled with safety.
Yep.
And safety costs money.
Yep.
Efficacy costs money.
Mm-hmm.
Efficacy is power. There's these laser
Components.
devices
Yeah.
that talk about they've got the same kilowatt, but they do it at a spot size that's microscopic
Mm-hmm.
instead of the large one. And that'll resonate with the physicians out there that are listening to us, but not to the customers. But just realize you're paying. You ought to, when you walk into a med spa, you ought to look at their devices. And I look on social media, and I don't know how you figure it out, but I would tell you that just make sure they have really good devices that are safe and effective. Look at before and after pictures. But the other thing you were talking about, truth, I just wanted to say, if I know this podcast is going out to KOLs, AM spa owners,
Yeah.
med spa owners,
Consumers
patients,
too.
consumers,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But I would tell you that if you're in the business, if you're a med spa, I manage 50 clinics, and we have a no jerk policy. But the clinics that do the best, there's a direct correlation with culture, and the people that have the best culture are honest and transparent, and they're self-aware. I think the most successful humans are honest, transparent, self-aware. They seek truth. We can give data to somebody, and there's two kinds of people that you give data to. Or we have evaluations. One of them will shoot the messenger and say the evaluation form needs to be done differently. It couldn't be right, but yet the turnover in their clinics, one after another. And then there's people that are successful. Those are the ones that are most willing to change, the most willing to look at the data, the most willing to do that. So that's just a little pearl. I've seen the direction of this podcast, and you're trying to help people on all levels.
Yeah.
And if they're listening to this, I just can't tell you, if you can take the emotion out of your management and run it on data, and be willing to change and be open and listen and be self-aware, A, you'll be more attractive to everyone that knows you, and B, your med spa is going to go through the roof, because you're going to do the things you need to be successful.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Taking it away from some of the things that we've talked about, like, medically, and again, seeker of truth piece, right?
Yeah.
You know, I know you're a big fan of Covey, right?
Yeah, I am.
So how is some of that philosophy applied to your, you know, your way you go about your business, but also in how you deal with patients?
Oh, a lot. I was going to mention Covey a minute ago because he reviews 200 years of ethic in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and for the first 150 years, we were based on a work ethic. Like, you get up early, you go to bed late, you work harder, and it's a long obedience in the same direction, and eventually you rise to the top, as opposed to this quick fix, illusionary ethic. He calls it something different, and I'm blocking on the name. But basically, it's like Oprah. It's like these people that will come in and they're influencers, and they know jack about what they're talking about, but perception is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you know, you just go out there and you say something that you're the expert 5 minutes after you've been in practice, and you just keep having this perception that's not true. And that's the difference with that. I still believe in the former. Mm-hmm. I still believe in the former, and you know, work ethic, and you go from time. I do believe that talking about work ethic and truth and telling people who you are on social media is a necessary evil these days. Yeah. And so I do that. I have my own little thing called Laser Guru that people follow.
Yep.
But so I got that out of Covey, and I've just learned you know, really so much about through his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that I would encourage everybody. It's one of those books that you really need to read.
It's a backbone. I mean, the 4 quadrants helps with being overwhelmed. I mean, you know, at times I find that you know, we're busy, you know, and I travel a lot, and you know, again, the way I was raised, I feel like I know who I am, but I have a lot of my identity wrapped up in what I do because there's purpose, I think, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can get overwhelmed. We're human beings, right? Mm-hmm. And just that's like something I started doing a long time ago that's something for me, and then I apply the 4 quadrants, is that anytime I'm feeling that, what I do is I just put everything down. I write it all down in a list. And then it sounds silly, but I stand over top of it and I look down at it and I'm like, that's how big this is compared to me, right? It's just, I need to do that physical process for me sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then I can say, okay, these are all the things. What's urgent and important? What's urgent, not important? What's important, not urgent? What's not urgent, not important, right? And then it allows me to prioritize and get things done. And I think that comes with maturity, like we talked about earlier, mm-hmm. right? Where, you know, I am a passionate person. When I was younger, I had a pretty bad temper, very competitive with sports and things. And I don't know that you ever lose that. My thought is that you just learn how to lengthen your fuse, right? Because mm-hmm. it's part of what makes mm-hmm. you who you are. Mm-hmm. But I again, it's being a student always, right? It's the difference between an average doctor and a great doctor is asking that 3rd, 4th, 5th level question to get to those things that you are talking about earlier, like root cause, right? You know, like one of the things that you've now implemented in the practice is like you looked at it from a resurfacing standpoint always, and now it's like that's one aspect of it. That's one cog in the wheel. There's so many other things tied to it, right?
Yeah, totally. And you choose those for people who don't want the downtime, even with resurfacing. And there's other ways we can do it with these total skin solutions we're talking about. Yeah. But I'd say that Covey is probably a foundational book for me. But that's an older book, right? Yeah. And
but I mean, when it's right, it's right.
It's right. It's absolutely right. You should do that. Yeah. But I'll tell you another book that I highly recommend is written by a guy named Jack McKeown, McKeown, a Stanford PhD that visited a lot of the Fortune 500 companies mm-hmm. and came up with some best practices. And that book's called Essentialism. I'm not sure we haven't talked about it. It is a book that I could not recommend more highly. And especially for people that are trying, like Covey's doing it with the 4 quadrants, like what's the most important thing? Mm-hmm. Well, he takes it from another way. And he basically says that, let's say we have 12 units on a clock and you can go 1 inch on each 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1 inch. But what if, the key is saying no to good things. It's not hard to say no to bad things. Watching too much television, watching too much screen time, even though it's hard to do, we know that's wrong and we shouldn't do that. But that's actually easier than saying no to good things, so that you can do the best thing.
Right.
And to me, that's been hugely helpful. And, somebody asked Warren Buffett recently, what has made him so successful over the years? And he said, me and my partner say no to everything. I heard Elon Musk say the same thing just last week, that somebody was talking about him and said, he says no to everything. Now, Warren Buffett and Elon Musk, you can like them or not like them, but they're successful.
There's a reason.
And it looks like they say yes to everything. They don't. They do one or two things really, really, really well. X and SpaceX is probably the best thing, and everything else he doesn't do, and whatever. And so I that's been hugely helpful for me. The other thing that was helpful out of that book was a bad hire is a gift that keeps giving. And I used to hire people that there wasn't anything wrong with them, but they didn't excite me. He makes it a point. Don't hire anybody unless you are super excited about them. And I'll tell you, that's hard. And you have to make go a while before you get somebody, especially in this work environment. And I'm hoping that's about to change.
Yeah.
But I will say that I have examples of where I've done that, and I would have hired these people in a heartbeat. And then someone walked in and they had it, and you could tell they had it. And I hired them. Those are things I've learned out of that book. It's a tremendous book for a business owner, for a human being, because we're always struggling in this world with options of what we need to do. And how do you choose what the right thing to do is? Yeah. And so when I interview an employee now, I've learned from, there's a book called The Purpose-Driven Life.
Yep.
And so we make every couple that has a kid that's spinning out on heroin or something, how can I help you if I don't know what your priority is? So I want you to write down your purpose in life. And I ask every person that comes in and interviews with me and to work for me, I say, what's your purpose in life? And you take Gen X or Gen Z or millennial, and they'll just, it blows their brain up. Yeah. I mean, what am I do?
Well, it's hard, I think, if nobody's asked them.
They've never asked them. And I think even if I don't hire them, I'm helping them. And I'll hire somebody and say, I don't know, I never figured it out. And they'll come back and they'll write it down. I want you to write it down. I don't want you to just tell me. I want you to write down. Why do you get up in the morning? It's important. Why wouldn't you ask that question? They're fixing to spend their life, the majority of their life with you if they work for you.
You spend more hours in your job than you do anything else.
So why are you coming to work?
Yeah.
Why do you get up every morning? What's your purpose in life? What's a win look like at the end of this year, at the end of 5 years, at the end of your life? I ask them those kind of questions. And they don't have to have it down. But an honest searching for that and a growth through that process is the kind of person I want to hire. It's the kind of person you want to work for you. And because I'm telling you, you can weed out a lot of people by doing that. Yep. They'll either get mad or walk out of you. I have not a clue, and whatever. It's amazing.
I definitely want to read that book. There's a book that has a similar philosophy, and I think David Allen wrote Getting Things Done.
Yeah.
And it has everybody has their to-do list, but it's a not to-do list. It's
exactly.
It's those things that are going to be those time wasters, and those things that are distractions that get you off. The things you need to say no to.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Dr. Burns, we're going to have to do this again.
I'd love to.
This was.
We really didn't talk about technology a lot, but I have to tell you, it's one of my. I think what we talked about today is really important, and it's not. I just think that people, having a. I think, is this a cynosure?
Well, yes, actually, the company is excited about me doing the podcast, and they don't view it as a conflict.
I think it actually says a lot about the company that they would support something like this, that talks about how to help people. What we're talking about is things that I've learned over 35 to 40 years. Now, maybe they're not all perfect, but those are things that you don't read in a book, and they're really important. They're about life, and you can make the quality of life better. And so for somebody to support something like that says a lot, and to have an employee like you working for a company says a lot about a company, and it says a lot about you. I really enjoyed it. The reason I like to talk about it is not because I think I have the corner on wisdom, but these discussions are what matter. You know, I don't think we're wasting our time talking about how to live life, and you know, our discussion on faith will be polarizing, but I hope they heard us say, I got tons of friends that think I'm crazy, and I'll have dinner with an atheist, but the discussion is good. And we need more of that. We need more of that discussion against polar opposites. We're so polarized today. And so I don't mean to offend anybody, but it may cause people to pursue a faith. It may cause people to think I'm crazy. But I love the podcasts are changing the world. It probably shaped our last election, whether you like it or not, because you can see people and you can see if they're full of crap or not.
And it's hope in its true essence, you know, and I think Rogan has kind of created the standard for this, right? Is that it's a way to try to unbiasedly hear truth and are somebody's truth at least, right?
Exactly.
To not be skewed one way or the other, right? And I can't thank you enough. I know that you have some things you're passionate about, and obviously for anybody that wants to find you, where can they find you for your medical practice and your
ministry?
CPP, and then the ministry? Where can they find you for?
Yeah, so it's Resurrect Skin MD, and so we have an account on social media and our website, if you Google up Resurrect Skin MD in Dallas, you'll find me. Cosmetic Physician Partners is a group that I think is great. If you have a great practice out there and you want to join a group where you maintain control, it's not venture capital or private equity. You get to maintain control, and it's been highly successful. And then our ministry is called the Prodigal. It's a Prodigal ministry in Dallas. It's out of a church called Watermark, and you can find us on Watermark Church. I think it's watermarkchurch.org through Prodigal, but we're an independent 501c3. And so it's hard for me to tell you. The next time we get together, I'll have it better for you, because right now we're at myprodigalroad.com, myprodigalroad.com. And it deals with families who are caught up with rebellious family members. It could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be rebellious, it could be an alcoholic husband, an alcoholic wife. It's mostly kids that are spinning out and being rebellion from whatever it is. Now, we're a Christian-based organization, so we define a prodigal as anybody that's not walking with God, but typically most people at the time, even if they have a faith, if the kid has a faith, they're not really walking with God if they're shooting up, doing drugs, and being rebellious.
They're masking something.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things for the addict. There's not much for the families, and so it's hit a nerve. So it's you can tell that's another huge passion of mine.
Thank you so much for being on here today. I appreciate it.
I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yes. So, today we covered a wide range of topics with Dr. Burns, and you can see his compassion, precision, and innovation around all of these topics. And again, one of the things that I really think sets him apart as somebody in this space is somebody that is willing to always be learning and looking at things from a much more open-minded perspective than most, right? And I think we need more of that in this world. Thank you so much for joining in. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.